Still sane, Doctor? As usual for each event, for Undertides I wanted to give out my thoughts and opinions of the event and its gameplay. Primarily the gameplay. So this event came out with the long-awaited arrival of Kal'tsit, as well as Skadi the Corrupting Heart, and then Gladia and Akufuyu also came out with this event. So with this event, let's go into the tutorial stage as usual, and see how this mechanic works to show that off for anyone watching this in the future. So this event, most of the enemies that you are facing in this event have what is called nervous impediment. As you can see here, Norcorn is getting stacks of this nervous impediment, as Doberman will explain here shortly. Okay, so nervous impediment won't directly harm us. It will ignore equipment defenses and will accumulate. So essentially the gimmick of this event is that most of the enemies provide stacks of the nervous impediment, and as soon as it fills up the bar, your operators will be knocked out and take 1,000 true damage. So this is very important because it essentially means that you can't just have one operator tank everything. You need to spread around. You need to spread around the stacks of this nervous impediment. But there's also other things in each of the stages, or at least a lot of them, that sort of help you deal with this. So the emergency aid building, which is this bell thing, if you have an operator near it, similar to the gamma phones in the Twilight of Waldemud event, I think that's what it's called, as long as you have an operator within 4 tiles around the bell tower, the nervous impediment will have its stack slowly decrease over time, as long as your operators are obviously not gaining extra stacks from that. But what is kind of important is that for a lot of the medals for this event, a lot of them will ask you to not activate any of them at least once for some of the later stages. So let's go into some of the enemies. So we have the standard hounds. So as you can see here, not all of the enemies do nervous impediment damage, but a lot of them do. So some of the more notable enemies are the Sea Reapers. So these things will provide nervous impediment in an area of effect around them, which is pretty interesting. And they do not actually attack, and as soon as you wake them up, either by attacking them, I'm not sure if they actually attack you if you block it. It is very similar to the Sarkaz enemies, so I'm guessing they don't wake up unless you have an operator hit them. But as soon as they wake up, they provide nervous impediment all around them, as well as every time they attack. So they are very dangerous in this event. So roll the clip of showing an example of that. So some other notable enemies is the Pocket Sea Crawler. So these things, in combination with the Reapers, are probably the most problematic enemies throughout this entire event. And that is because they initially they don't attack at all, but every time that you deal a certain percentage of damage to them, they provide the Nervous Impediment and deal arts damage. So this is really kind of one of those enemies that can be frustrating to deal with, because if you let one of them get too close to your defender line right outside the blue box, they can easily stun your operators by doing a lot of damage in a short amount of time, depending on how high your DPS is, and can easily wipe out your ranged operators on elevated tiles. So with the story of Undertides, they also had another unique enemy that is a mini-boss, and in my opinion is more interesting than the actual boss of this event, called the First Attack, and it's the Seaborn enemy from the story. And he provides the Nervous Impediment and doing ranged attacks, and has a lot of HP. So I thought his interactions with opponents our operators were a lot more interesting than the actual boss. And then a side mention should be made to, on some of these stages, you have the automatic maintenance drone, which essentially activates those bell towers automatically for you. But remember, for some of the medals, you can't let them actually do that, so that actually provided some interesting strategies to try to destroy these before they activate the bell towers. So, or emergency aid building, I suppose I should be calling it. And then finally we have the actual boss of Undertides, which is this thing. Which is one of the only bosses, or at least probably is the only boss that is completely stationary. And it has, of course, as you would expect, a ton of HP, and provides the Nervous Impediment to your operators. Except it can attack any operators on the map, and it attacks 2 of your operators that have the highest defense. So it's kind of like increasing stacks of that Nervous Impediment like over time on 2 operators, so it's definitely something to keep in mind. And then as soon as you do enough damage, it will have extensions of itself that will stun your operators indefinitely and deal damage over time, and so that can be pretty problematic. But overall, I didn't really find this boss to be too much of an issue, and I did have a small clip of that, so I'll roll that. So going into the EX stages, as usual, we have the harder versions of each of the enemies, and the nourished crawlers as well as the Reapers were definitely very problematic. And to be completely honest, I think it was SVEX6, because it has 4 Reapers right from the start. I thought this was much harder than even EX8, and I think EX7 was kind of irritating as well, because I had the first to speak but I found EX8 to actually be one of the easier EX stages. So overall, I think they did a really good job on making great use of the nervous impediment mechanic, because it makes it so that you don't just, heal all the damage that your operators take. You have that other set of another health bar, so to speak, in order to make it so that your operators don't get stunned and allow the enemies onward. And the crawlers, you had to really keep in mind where they were, because if you didn't get rid of them from a distance, they have very wide AoE, as well as the Reapers. So I've thought that this event really fleshed out the main mechanic, which was definitely something I was disappointed by in the previous event, in A Walk in the Dust, where they had the drone mechanic, but then it just felt like they didn't do enough with it. Like, it just felt like they could have had like one more drone or harder stages with that event, and pretty much the main focus was exclusively on the Emperor's Blade boss, which I thoroughly enjoyed the Emperor's Blade boss, but at the same time I still wish that they had done more with the drone mechanic. So with that, Undertides I thoroughly enjoyed. I remember when this event was announced for the 2-year anniversary on the CN server, that I was very excited to see this event for myself, and also Kal'tsit finally coming out after after all this time. I know it's not technically the 2-year anniversary for global yet, but it is exciting to see how she plays, and also after me using her myself, she isn't actually as broken as I was thinking. You have to use a little bit of strategy to use her, especially against some of the story bosses. But either way, I thought the story was really good, as well as the mechanic. They really fleshed it out and made it interesting, and that is something that I can't give Arknights enough credit, is that they keep coming up with new mechanics and doing well with them. And even if I don't enjoy the mechanic, I can still appreciate how far they went with it and how well they did with it. So A Walk in the Dust was pretty much like one of those few events that I was really disappointed on, that they could have went further with the gameplay mechanic. And I think one of the hardest like actual mechanics that they've done so far was probably the Dusk event, where they had the different color alignments because of like the enemies that can only be blocked by a certain color, as well as like the self-destruct enemies and whatnot. So with that, Undertides was definitely an event that I thoroughly enjoyed. So hopefully you did too, and you didn't lose too much sanity to that nervous impediment enemies. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day.